Melissa? That's fine. That's more.
All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I am really excited to introduce Megan Euker, who has, like I said, has a really long-time relationship with the museum. We're really excited she's here. She came all the way from Tampa. Megan Euker is an Italian and American artist and designer and a two-time U.S. Fulbright recipient to Italy in both Florence and Sicily. She comes from a background in art and design, obtaining an MFA and BFA degrees from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Euker is the project manager at San Rocco Therapeutics and has also taught at SAIC, USF in Tampa, Florida, the Siena Art Institute, Italy, and MADE in Sicily, among other universities. Additionally, Euker is the agent for Wall Street Journal bestselling author Patrick Durandi and his band, Patrick Durandi and the Orphan Stream. Euker has exhibited artwork internationally at galleries and is represented by Linda Warren Projects since 2008. She's also exhibited at museums, including a solo exhibition, The Cure, at this museum. And this exhibition showcased current issues in orphan diseases, especially sickle cell disease and beta thalassemia. She has additionally curated 3 exhibitions of her students' work, again at this museum, which is why we love to have her back. And this exhibition featured medical devices created under her mentorship. Her 3rd iteration of this exhibit is currently on display. It's up right now on the 4th floor, so make sure to check it out after the program. You're welcome to go review it. After the panel discussion, there will be some time for questions, but please give me a round of applause for Megan.
All right, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Bernie, Jacob, Caroline, Laura, Lindsay, and it was incredible to watch it on the screen. Thank you so much. So I'm going to just read some introductions of Bernie and Jacob, and then we'll start with some questions. And like Lindsay said, we'll have some time for questions from the audience at the end. So around 8:30, we'll start with audience questions. So some introductions. Jacob Taunton is the older brother and living donor for Kayte Hollingsworth. Documentary N of 1. As Katie's living donor, Jacob underwent apheresis, saphenous vein donation, bone marrow donation, and liver donation. He is married with 2 children, currently living in North Carolina. Bernard Friedman is founder and creative director of the Los Angeles-based documentary production company Flying Mind. He directed the feature documentary N of 1 in 2019, an inquiry into the nature of innovation as understood through the story of a novel approach to cancer, and the short film American Homes in 2012, an animated 1,000-year history of residential architecture in North America that includes interviews with notable figures in the world of architecture and design. He also produced the feature documentary Bogalusa Charm 2017, a study of changing South American South, which premiered at Slam Dance. And he is an executive producer for Bending the Arc 2017, the story of a group of young med students who sparked an international revolution in rural healthcare, which premiered at Sundance. Bernard is the author of the book, The American Idea of Home, published by the University of Texas Press. So I will start with a question for Bernard. What do you feel is the value of making this documentary? In other words, why did you make this film? What did you ultimately see was so important to document in this story?
I think most significantly is the heroism of the people involved, taking huge risks and going a literal and metaphorical distance that is unreasonable, unexpected, and that's a story that really should inspire everyone.
And Jacob, my first question is, Howard is not a doctor and has no medical training, as we saw, yet ends up leading a highly technical effort that he himself came up with. What is it about this guy that you had the confidence to pursue the life-risking procedure?
He just had confidence. He may not show it in his mannerisms, but he was just confident. And at some point, the first doctor wasn't a doctor. So it doesn't matter. If you know what if you study, be anything. Doesn't matter.
And of course, probably Kayte's first reaction we saw in the documentary, she says, you know, he knows more than most of the doctors that I've talked to. So I'm sure her confidence after speaking, I think the first phone call was 3 hours, 2 hours, her confidence instilled confidence in you and your family as well.
You know, I don't want to over-exalt Howard, but Fuchs, Dr. Fuchs, talks about him as one of the dozen people in the world who can speak to some of these pretty advanced ideas about immunology.
And how did you, Bernard, get acquainted with Dr. Fuchs?
Dr. Fuchs was Howard's friend, and I was a cancer patient years ago, and I survived, and I was sort of interested in kind of contributing philanthropically, and Howard said, oh, you have to talk to Fuchs, you know, the out-of-the-box thinker about immunotherapy at Johns Hopkins. I actually became friends with Fuchs. He's a pretty open-minded guy.
And now he's continuing this trial. So
yeah.
Since the film has been made, have you kept in touch and followed up on the status of the trials that he's continuing at Hopkins?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, sure. The trial that they are speaking about stalled, which is painful and shocking. What happened was that Johns Hopkins actually, they started it, and establishing a trial is difficult in and of itself, but then Johns Hopkins lost its live liver transplant surgeon. They didn't get a new one for 3-4 years. And Howard didn't sit on his hands about it. He went and tried to move it to Columbia University Hospital, and then went up to Toronto and tried to move it, with Fuchs's help, up to there's a hospital system in Toronto, but they didn't get traction. But then they reformulated it. I wish I could speak to it in detail, but I can, but it's a little convoluted. But in any case, a variation of this, with some hindsight and advancement in the thinking, was revisited at Johns Hopkins and is essentially there, although they're having a little bit of trouble, accruing patients. But it's happening, slowly.
And are they doing the trial anywhere else that you know of aside from Hopkins?
The trial has, it's a, what do you call that, multi-center, there's a phrase for it, but I forgot. But in any case, I think they're also doing it in Florida, somewhere in Florida.
All right, and then my next question for Bernie is, how do you justify making a film where the protagonist, being Howard, does not have any experience considering a life or death situation? Meaning, essentially, you're going around the medical industry, or Howard is going around the medical industry, and your portrayal of him, or not your portrayal of him, but the portrayal of him as being the protagonist in the film.
So I understand your question. You know what I mean, by like putting a lens on Howard, I'm elevating him even though he's not a physician. Is that what you mean? Like I'm giving him too much cover for doing something that is not sanctioned by medicine. I mean, establishment medicine.
Yeah, I mean, not in a judgmental way, saying you're giving him too much credit. Just as it is, he is the center of the film and does not have a medical background, and he's put in charge of making this life or death decision. So I think interpret it as you like, but
Okay, he's not credentialed. I actually tried to talk him into going and at least getting a PhD, which he could under Fuchs's auspices at Johns Hopkins. Fuchs was like twisting his arm. Come, you know, make this happen. Be there for 3 years with a PhD. You're a genius. He likes the identity of being an outsider, and he functions in a way as a provocateur. And those who hear him and want to follow through on his ideas, that's their responsibility. He's not, I don't think, he's a deeply sincere person and profoundly self-educated, and I think that it's this kind of celebration in looking at his story of somebody who is, a self-taught scientist. He's a self-taught thinker who has something to say that is inspiring in that he did it all himself. There is a certain aspect of him that is a bit Asperger-y, and I think not knowing too much about that condition, it does seem to have a role in his sort of self-isolation that then led to an ability to drill down pretty deeply and focus in ways that are not familiar to me, that I don't really feel like I could ever go there.
okay, thank you. And Jacob, what would you think stands out, maybe 3 or 5 things as the most important things that you have learned from this whole experience?
Don't be afraid to be the first. Just don't be afraid. I mean, to not try something just because it's not been done before, that's not enough. Everything's been done one time. And again, until we get it right, just look at our history of aviation, look at books, people who wrote about it, imagined it, and we finally did it. 60 years later, we're on the moon. Gotta be first sometimes.
I mean, what was it that, compartmentalized?
I've just never been someone who's afraid.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel fear, but it's like, if you're afraid of it, learn about it. Maybe you'll get through it and be a better person.
That covers at least 3
I don't know.
3 things.
Yeah, I mean, in at least what we saw in the film, you steadily had this incredible cool throughout, very, very challenging situation. I mean, you went to another country to, put to sleep and have a piece of your liver taken out and transplanted, and the stem cell collection, and then the vein in the leg that I believe at first was unplanned when, at least at the point where you were departing from the United States. And from the beginning, it was like you never questioned it. You were like, if I am a match for you, I'll do it. And I'm going to save my sister. And then even when you were in the hospital, I mean, the amount of cool that you had, and it was really incredible. Are you able to talk about that at all? Just you were with your mother and family in the hospital, and can you give us any more insight, perhaps something that we didn't see in the film?
My mother, as many mothers are, prone to panic and just let's lash out things and figure it out after the fact. I've always been calm, think about it, read up on things. I'm not afraid to delve. Like, I'm just read and learn and take what you've done in your own life and just try to accept what you're being told and listen, but not just follow. I'm running in circles here.
No, that's great.
You know, it seems to me that you have like a dialectic with Kayte about your courage. You know, she had to ask you to do this.
She was afraid it was going to be from the beginning because I wouldn't say no. Right? She's like, she had understood this could be a really bad idea, and I could walk away with this. I could have just not walked away at all.
Right.
But she knew I wouldn't say no, but my brother, he would look at it a little more logistically and say, maybe this is the best idea for me, even though I know he would have done it, but he would have. I would, if she walked through there and said, we need to do it again, I would, let's go. That's just how I did it. Knowing if it turned out exactly the same, I would still do it again, because it just has to be done.
I hope that the fact that there's this sort of dominoes that it started, which is I think exemplified in that trial that persists, is heartening to you.
To know it's still going, that's good.
And of course, there's likely lots of ethical questions that are raised from the experimental therapies to the ability for a patient to decide what to do, for the ability of a non-medical consultant to decide or give advice, for a family member to give advice. And interestingly, it seems like the ethics might come out of this is an experimental therapy, should it have been done? But in the end, some of the doctors are making comments that, you know, she had already been through radiation and chemotherapy and the body has been so attacked by this. So not only was the experimental therapy ethical question, but maybe the therapies that are so widely accepted because, as was mentioned in the beginning, they're protocols and we're used to using them. So that'll just lead me into the last question because I don't have time for questions for all of you. So one more question for Bernie and then more for Jacob. In the film, Howard asks why Kayte shouldn't be allowed to choose any healthcare options she can secure for herself. When choosing our healthcare, ought we be expected and encouraged to take total responsibility for ourselves and have the right to try anything we believe could help us?
Yes, Howard the libertarian. Railing against the Canadian healthcare system, by the way, not so much a comment on the United States, but more like the imposed limits that socialized medicine in Canada has, which is a nuance to recognize. I mean, in the film he says, you know, if you know that you're going to die, who should stop you? It's terrible, the idea that someone should have an authority over any choice that you might make to help yourself. So in a way, in the case of Kayte, I 100% agree with him. I almost think there's no ethical issue. Of course, whatever she can do to save herself and help herself. In the case of Jacob, who's healthy, that's a different issue, I think. He's taking a huge risk with his life for her, and also probably couldn't say no, and never thought about saying no. But because of that, there's also issues around who's protecting Jacob, right? Who's protecting the patient who's risking their life when their life is not injected? And that's the very crux of what contemporary medicine will address this. So somebody has to protect the patient, the person who is making a decision emotionally without recognizing the risks that shouldn't, by our calculation, because she has advanced disease, make. They shouldn't be making that decision. But again, the devil in this case is in the details, because I think that Jacob wasn't looking to donate part of his liver anywhere, and that part of his liver was not available to others. So that's a mitigating quality to the ethical question.
Thank you. And Jacob, I have one more question for you. In long hindsight, after having gone through this experience, if you could, what would you change specifically about healthcare? Healthcare in different countries, it could be in different countries and in different hospitals, how people approach things, because now you've experienced a whole lot of doctors and healthcare in different countries with different doctors.
Oh, that's a spicy one. I think the world needs to get smaller. Just be less concerned about who and where you're from and how. I'm a big proponent of why does it cost so much? Why does it cost at all? Why does our life have a dollar sign next to it? Why can't we just be all together? This is the part that gets me all mad and emotional, thinking that there's people struggling who can be helped, but they can't get the help because they don't have insurance, they don't have money, they're not in the right country, they're not in the right place, they're not the right person, they can't get into a trial. They can't get a doctor to actually listen to them because the doctors are following their protocols. I hear the word protocol and I see the ads on YouTube of medicines they ask your doctor about blah 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 unpronounceable crap, but why can't it be advertised and we can't really talk when they're rigid to their protocols? Advertisers who throw their medicines out there in our face and say talk to your doctor about this, and I wasn't looking for your advertisement, I wasn't looking for your, it doesn't fit me, so why? I just hate the dollar aspect of it. That's enough out of it. Getting mad.
And Caroline, if I can ask you a question as well. Since now you've been in the United States as far as I can, I think for 9-10 years, and all of your experience working in the hospital in India, and now you're working in North Carolina, is there a big cultural difference that you could talk about, or even the access that we have here versus India?
So India is totally different than the United States when it comes to the medical or anything regarding any type of treatment, because in India you have to have money to go to a doctor, and in America you don't have to have money, but you have to have insurance. For insurance, you have to have everything is surrounded by that economy of people, and we treat people like when we take the 19-day oath, we say we serve people, but we are not serving people. We are serving people that comes with a package. Okay. So when I would like for here to change is, I'm working currently in an adolescent unit, in a psych unit, I've seen multiple children staying without their parents because of because even though they have everything, even when they go out, they are unable to take care of themselves because of all those medications. Because if a person goes out, if he didn't have insurance, he may not be able to get a 30-day of his supply. And then back again on the street, so it's a revolving door. So the medicine needs to be accessible so the disease will not spread. And that's what I would like for to change. Medicine has to be easily accessible to everyone.
Thank you. And if there are questions in the audience, I can take a few.
Hi. So I'm a surgeon myself, so understanding your questions are a little bit based in that. But I really first want to say thank you for sharing the stories. That's just quite remarkable. And for those who don't know about the story, I hope that they get to see it. So broader exposure. I was curious because it's all about the patient, not the health system, regardless of where you are. I think Kayte really deserved the best, and I found it hard for her probably to have to travel to India when within the United States, whether Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic in Florida, Jacksonville, there's quite a few good transplant programs. And I was wondering if anybody explored the possibility of doing the procedure at her convenience, even though the doctors were from Israel and India. I don't think that's a barrier. So I'm just curious.
It's my understanding, first of all, Dr. Rella was actually a surgeon at King's College in London and traveled back and forth. He opened up the unit in Chennai, where, in fact, all their equipment and the team were rather more advanced than the team in King's College. He tried to get the IRB, tried to get the IRB to move on it. I'm not sure it's the IRB in Great Britain, but I think it's an equivalent.
Similar.
Yeah, and he had a great deal of influence at the hospital in India, and he said, she does not have enough time for this bullshit. We cannot wait for you guys to think about this. And Slavin was, I'll go anywhere. That's how it happened. I think that any issues, any complications and the challenges that they had, they were pretty experienced and prepared for in India, and wouldn't have been better in Great Britain or even at Hopkins, I think.
Yeah, I wasn't implying that
Right.
the care was better. I'm just thinking for the patient and her family.
Yeah.
Just to the point you made that the world needs to kind of come together, right?
Yeah.
We all want the best wherever it comes from. And today with telecommunications and whatnot, you can do that. But I'm just curious because I would imagine Hopkins or Mayo Clinic or somebody would have tried.
Johns Hopkins is well known for having a lot of people moving through it, a lot of potential trial patients, but at the same time, it's a place filled with brilliant clinicians who are fighting over those patients. So it's not actually easier to establish even an N of 1 illustrious. It's kind of the kismet that a lot of these forces came together in India. It's not like there were all of the elements at play in various places. I mean, I think Slavic in a way was one of the few people in the world who was willing to experiment with something that they weren't, they just didn't quite know enough about yet.
Thank you.
And are there some other questions?
I was just curious, Jacob, how are you doing now? How's your health now? Like, are you still noticing the similar issues you were having after 2 years after the surgery?
My left foot's still mostly numb. I've grown very accustomed to that. I don't even really have to think about it anymore. Over time, I did have some issues, a little digestive issue that I'm not sure if that was actually related, but I did end up with a hernia in one spot. You can still see a little swollen spot. This won't go away, but oh well. It's my Kayte side. She was here. If you put both of our scars together, it's next. So I'm just glad. My sister's gone, but she's still with me.
Are there other questions?
Jacob, during your India trip and during that time, at what point did the sparks start to fly in Carolina?
There was a whole.
Can we get the backstory?
Rough breakdown. I know when we were in the hospital room, the nurses were hesitant to come in, and the way she entered in the door the first time I saw her is like she was shoved in the door. It's like, okay, you decided you are their nurse. So it's like I don't know if you ever seen Seinfeld. Kramer will slide into Jerry's apartment. That's how the first time she entered in, that's what she did. She was pushed in. Slipped across her and was like, I guess I'm the nurse. But she kept her name tag backwards, so we couldn't read her name. And as she was like talking about she's going to be a nurse, she never said her name. Both my brother-in-law and I were like trying to get a name to learn. And she kept it hidden. But I finally got a glimpse of it. I was like, Jake, her name is Caroline somehow. Why is her name Caroline? Everyone else has, your typical Indian name. Hers is Caroline. And it just stuck to me. And as she moved about through our nursing experience, I would just, when she entered the room, I always felt better. She would come in and rummage through drawers, trying to find things for us, and I just felt better when she was there. And after my mother and I came back from India, and when my sister passed, I was on the phone with my brother-in-law, and he's like, Jacob, his name's Jake, my name's Jake, so it's a little confusing, but he's like, Caroline's special, and I know you think she's special. I can see it. I can see that she thinks you're special. We have to do something about this because there's a bad situation here in her life and we have to do something. I'm like, all right, let's do it. And then I talked to her on the phone, and at that point is when I considered us married. And over the course of time, trying to get her over here, we spent thousands of dollars on Skype. The longest phone call we had was 17 and a half hours on Skype.
Okay, you're embarrassing.
It was a long fight. Part of the story is not mine to tell because I don't know if she wants it out there. There's things that she needs to say herself if she wishes.
And Caroline, you told me something about your sons, the birth date of your sons and their names and the meaning. Would you like to share that?
My first son, his name is Ezreal, which is a variation of the angel Azrael, which is the angel of death, not the one that kills you, but the one that takes you to where you belong. Comforts you along the way regardless of your destination, whether you're going up or down. So that's where his name came from. And our youngest son, which his birthday is the day my sister passed. His original due date was her birthday. So when he came, and we named him Abather, which is just the father of knowledge. So we kind of follow along nice mythological names. Some of them kind of go through the name from different schools. But
Any last questions?
Not a question, but thank you very much for sharing.
Thank you, Megan, for this guidance.
Sure. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming.